The gravel crunched under the tires of my rental car as I pulled up the familiar circular drive of the Whitmore estate in Millfield, Connecticut. The Georgian colonial mansion looked exactly as I remember from my childhood. Imposing red brick, white columns, and every window glowing with warm light for the Christmas Eve gathering. What my family didn't know was that this year, I wasn't coming home alone. Holy damn, Thorne, Leander said from the passenger seat, his green eyes wide as he took in the sprawling property. You didn't mention you grew up in a castle. It's not a castle, I said, though I understood his reaction. After 6 months of dating, I'd somehow never found the right moment to explain exactly how wealthy my family was. Growing up as Thorne Whitmore III came with expectations I'd been running from since college. Just a big house. Leander laughed, the sound nervous but warm. A big house with actual stables and what looks like a guest cottage bigger than my apartment. I reached over and took his hand, feeling the familiar jolt of electricity that had been there since our first date. Hey, look at me. He turned, and I was struck again by how beautiful he was. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair that never quite stayed in place, and those incredible eyes that seemed to see straight through me. Leander Cray was everything my family would never expect me to bring home. A carpenter from Vermont, raised by a single mother, more comfortable in work boots than dress shoes. I don't care about any of this, I said, gesturing at the house. I care about you. That's why I wanted you here. Even though you haven't told them about me yet. My stomach twisted with guilt. I wanted to do it in person, face to face. No hiding behind phone calls or emails. Leander squeezed my hand. And if it goes badly, then we leave. Together. He studied my face for a long moment, then leaned over and kissed me softly. Okay, let's go meet the family. The front door opened before we could even knock, and my mother appeared in a cloud of Chanel and carefully controlled emotion. Patricia Whitmore had perfected the art of society smile, warm enough to seem genuine, controlled enough to maintain dignity. Thorne, darling, she said, embracing me with a precise amount of pressure that wouldn't wrinkle her dress. You look thin. Haven't you been eating? I'm fine, Mother. I stepped back and felt Leander's presence beside me like an anchor. I'd like you to meet Leander Cray. Leander, this is my mother, Patricia Whitmore. I watched my mother's expression carefully as she took in Leander. The way his dark jeans and button-down shirt, while perfectly nice, weren't quite what she'd expect from someone I'd bring home. The way he carried himself with quiet confidence rather than the practiced polish of her social circle. Mr. Cray, she said, extending her hand with that same controlled smile. How lovely to meet you. Thorne didn't mention he was bringing a guest. Mrs. Whitmore, Leander said, shaking her hand firmly. Thank you for welcoming me into your home. It's beautiful. Please call me Patricia. Any friend of Thorne's is welcome here. Friend. The word hung in the air like a challenge, and I felt my jaw tighten. Actually, Mother. Thorne. My father's voice boomed from the doorway, and suddenly I was being pulled into one of his bear hugs. Whitmore men were expected to be strong, successful, and utterly certain of their place in the world. My father, Thorne Whitmore Jr., embodied all those things. Good to see you, son. Traffic wasn't too bad from the city. Fine, Dad. I extracted myself from the hug and turned to Leander. This is Leander Cray. Leander, my father. Sir, Leander said, extending his hand. Thank you for having me. My father's handshake was firm, assessing. Cray, that's not a Connecticut name. Where are you from? Vermont, sir. Small town called Peacham. Ah, and what do you do up there? I'm a carpenter. Custom furniture, mainly. I saw something flicker in my father's eyes. Not disapproval exactly, but a kind of mental filing away of information. In his world, people were either useful or they weren't. Leander, with his honest work and lack of connections, would fall into the latter category. How interesting, my mother said, though her tone suggested it was anything but. Well, come in, both of you. Everyone's gathered in the drawing room. The drawing room was exactly as I remembered, all mahogany and crystal, with a fire crackling in a marble fireplace, and my extended family arranged in small groups like pieces on a chessboard. aunts and uncles, cousins and their spouses, all of them part of the carefully curated world I'd grown up in. Thorn. My cousin Bo appeared at my elbow, drink in hand and cheeks flushed from what was clearly not his first scotch of the evening. About time you showed up. We were starting to think you'd finally decided to skip Christmas entirely. Just busy with work, I said, accepting the drink he pressed into my hand. Bo! This is Leander. Leander, my cousin Bo Ashford. Pleasure, Bo said, though his eyes were already calculating. How do you know our Thorn? We met at a coffee shop in Manhattan. Leander said easily. I was there for a furniture exhibition. Furniture? Bo laughed as if this was the most amusing thing he'd heard all day. How rustic. I felt heat rise in my chest. Leander's incredibly talented. He makes museum-quality pieces. I'm sure he does. Bo's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Well, welcome to the family circus, Leander. Hope you're ready for the full Whitmore experience. As if on cue, my grandmother's voice cut through the general conversation like a blade. Thorn, come here and tell me about this job of yours. I still don't understand why you insist on working for other people when you have a perfectly good family business waiting for you. Eleanor Whitmore was 93 years old and sharp as a tack, with opinions on everything and the social standing to make those opinions heard. She held court from her favorite armchair, a crystal tumbler of bourbon in one hand, and her famous pearl necklace catching the light. Hello, grandmother, I said, bending to kiss her cheek. I'd like you to meet Leander Cray. She looked up at him with those pale blue eyes that missed nothing. Young man. Ma'am, Leander said, and I was proud of how steady his voice was. It's an honor to meet you. Is it? She studied him like he was a specimen under glass. And what exactly is your connection to my grandson? This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. I could feel the weight of family expectation pressing down on me. Generations of Whitmore men who'd married the right women and produced the right children and never, ever stepped outside the carefully drawn lines of what was acceptable. Leander is my boyfriend, grandmother. The words fell into room like stones into still water, creating ripples of silence that spread outward until every conversation had stopped. I felt Leander's hand brush mine, a brief touch of support that gave me strength. My grandmother's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. I see. We've been together for 6 months. I continued, my voice stronger now. I wanted you all to meet him because he's important to me. Important? My father repeated, his voice carefully neutral. Thorn, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. I felt Leander's fingers intertwine with mine, and I held on tight. I'm 28 years old. I don't need anyone's permission to be with the person I love. The word hung in the air between us, and I felt Leander's intake of breath beside me. It was the first time I'd said it out loud, and the truth of it settled into my chest like coming home. Love, my mother said faintly, as if the word were foreign. Yes, I said, looking directly at her. I love him. The silence stretched on, uncomfortable and heavy, until my grandmother's voice cut through it like a whip. Well, she said, taking a sip of her bourbon, I suppose we should get to know him then. Sit down, both of you. Tell me about this furniture business. For the next hour, I watched my family slowly, carefully, begin to interrogate Leander with a kind of polite ruthlessness that only came from generations of social conditioning. They asked about his background, his education, his family, his business, all while maintaining a veneer of polite interest. Leander handled it beautifully. He answered their questions honestly, spoke about his work with passion, and never once seemed intimidated by the weight of their scrutiny. When my aunt asked about his parents, he simply said his father had passed when he was young and his mother had raised him alone. When my uncle made a comment about working with your hands, Leander smiled and said he'd always believed there was honor in creating something beautiful and lasting. But I could see the toll it was taking on him. The slight tension in his shoulders, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, the careful way he chose his words. By the time dinner was announced, I was ready to grab him and leave. You okay? I whispered as we made our way to the dining room. I'm fine, he said, but his voice was tight. They're intense. We can go. Right now. We can get in the car and drive back to the city. He stopped walking and turned to face me, his green eyes serious. Is that what you want? I want you to be comfortable. I want you to be happy. I am happy. I'm with you. He reached up and touched my cheek gently. But I need to know this is what you really want. Not just tonight, but all of it. This world, this family, the complications that come with being with someone like me. Someone like you? Someone who doesn't fit into their neat little boxes. Someone who's going to make things difficult for you. I caught his hand and pressed it firmly against my cheek. You're not making anything difficult. You're making everything worthwhile. He smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from him all evening. Okay, then let's go eat dinner with your family. Dinner was a formal affair, as all Whitmore family dinners were. The dining room table could seat 20, and tonight it was set with the good china and crystal that had been in the family for generations. I found myself seated between my mother and my cousin's wife, with Leander directly across from me next to my uncle. The conversation flowed around us. Talk of business and politics and social events, the kind of surface-level discourse that filled the space without revealing anything real. I watched Leander navigate it all with quiet grace, answering questions when asked, contributing to the conversation when appropriate, but never trying to be something he wasn't. It was during the main course that things took a turn. So Leander, my Aunt Vivian said, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant trouble was coming. Do you have any siblings? No, ma'am. Just me. And you never married? At your age. I felt my stomach drop. Aunt Vivian. It's okay, Leander said quietly, his eyes meeting mine across the table. No, I never married. I'm gay. The words fell into the conversation like a bomb, and I watched my family's faces carefully. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. My father's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. My grandmother, surprisingly, seemed completely unruffled. I see, Vivian said, her voice pitch carried just the right amount of understanding concern. And this is recent? Being gay? Leander's voice was steady, but I could see the steel underneath. No, ma'am. That's been consistent my whole life. Of course, I didn't mean, she fluttered her hands helplessly. I just meant this lifestyle. Vivian. My grandmother's voice cut through the awkwardness like a blade. Perhaps we could discuss something else. But the damage was done. I could see it in the way conversation became stilted, in the careful way people avoided looking directly at Leander, in the subtle shift in the room's energy. Excuse me, I said, standing abruptly. I need some air. I walked out of the dining room and through the house, my footsteps echoing on the marble floors. I could hear Leander following me, but I didn't stop until I'd reached the back terrace, where the cold December air hit my face like a slap. Thorne. I'm sorry, I said, turning to face him. I'm so fucking sorry. I hoped they'd be better than this. They're scared, he said simply. This isn't what they expected. That's not an excuse. No, it's not, but it's understandable. He stepped closer, and I could see his breath in the cold air. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I looked back at the house, at the warm light spilling from the windows, at the world I'd grown up in and never quite fit into. Then I looked at Leander, at the man who'd somehow managed to make me feel more myself than I'd ever been. I want to go upstairs, I said. I want to show you my room. I want to hold you and forget about all of this, at least for tonight. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we figure out what comes next. Together. He smiled and reached for my hand. Lead the way. My childhood bedroom was exactly as I'd left it when I moved to New York. Preppy and sterile, with rowing trophies on the shelves and a twin bed that had seemed enormous when I was 12. Now, with Leander standing in the doorway looking around, it felt like a museum exhibit of someone I used to be. Very you, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Or at least, very young you. God, it's awful, isn't it? I sat down on the edge of the bed and rubbed my face with both hands. I can't believe I lived here for 18 years. It's not awful. It's just careful, like everything else in this house. Leander closed the door behind him and came to sit beside me on the narrow bed. The mattress dipped under his weight, and I felt his warmth along my side. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, "for telling them, for standing up for us." "Are you?" "Because it felt like I was throwing you to the wolves. You were protecting me. The whole night, I could see it." He turned to face me, and in the dim light from the bedside lamp, his eyes were soft. "When your cousin made that comment about my work, when your aunt started asking invasive questions, when your uncle tried to make me feel small, you were right there. You didn't let them diminish me." "I love you," I said, the words coming easy this time. I should have said it sooner. I should have told you before we got here, before we walked into this mess. "You're telling me now." "I love you," I repeated, reaching up to touch his face. "I love your hands and your laugh, and the way you make me feel like I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. I love that you're not intimidated by any of this." "I'm terrified," he interrupted. "I'm completely terrified. Your family has more money than my entire town has ever seen, and they're looking at me like I'm some kind of fortune hunter." "Are you?" He laughed, the sound breathless. "If I were, I'd be pretty bad at it. I didn't even know you had money until tonight. I was trying to figure out how to tell you. It's not exactly first date conversation. No, but 6 months in, it might have come up." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I was scared you'd look at me differently, like I was just some rich kid playing at being independent. "Are you?" The question hung between us, serious and searching. I thought about my job at the nonprofit, about the way I'd insisted on paying my own way through everything, about the trust fund I'd never touched. "No," I said finally. "I'm not, but I understand why you'd wonder." "I don't wonder. I know you." He leaned closer, close enough that I could feel his breath against my lips. "I know you volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends. I know you tip restaurant servers like you've worked in food service yourself. I know you cry at romantic movies, and you're afraid of spiders, and you make the world's worst coffee. Hey, my coffee isn't that bad." He kissed me, cutting off my protest, and I felt the familiar electricity shoot through my nervous system. When we broke apart, both breathing harder, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you too," he said quietly. "I have for weeks. I just wasn't sure if I was allowed to say it. You're allowed to say anything to me. Always." "Then I love you, Thorne Whitmore III. I love your terrible coffee and your good heart, and the way you're brave enough to bring me home to meet your family, even though you knew it would be complicated." Complicated is an understatement. Maybe, but I'd rather be complicated with you than simple with anyone else. I pulled him closer, and we kissed again, deeper this time, with the kind of desperate need that had been building all evening. His hands found the buttons of my shirt, and I helped him push it off my shoulders, then reached for his sweater. "Are you sure?" he asked against my mouth. "Here, in your childhood bedroom, with your family downstairs?" "I'm sure. I want you. I wanted you all night. Even after the disaster at dinner? Especially after the disaster at dinner. I want to remember this night for something good." He smiled and pushed me back onto the narrow bed, following me down until we were pressed together from chest to thigh. The bed was barely wide enough for both of us, but somehow that made it better, more intimate, more necessary. "We'll have to be quiet," he whispered, his lips finding the sensitive spot behind my ear. "I'll try." I breathed, already losing the ability to form coherent thoughts under his touch. He worked his way down my body with deliberate slowness, mapping every inch of skin with his mouth and hands. When he reached the waistband of my pants, he looked up at me with those incredible green eyes. "I love you," he said again like a promise. "I love you too." What happened next was a slow, careful exploration of each other, muffled gasps and whispered endearments in the darkness. We moved together with increasing urgency, finding the rhythm that was uniquely ours, losing ourselves in a connection that had nothing to do with money or family expectations or social standing. When it was over, we lay tangled together on the too-small bed, breathing hard and holding each other close. Leander's head was on my chest, and I could feel his heartbeat gradually slowing against my ribs. "So," he said after a while, his voice soft in the darkness, "what happens tomorrow?" Tomorrow we go back to the city. We go back to our lives. And your family? I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about my grandmother's calculating eyes, my mother's careful smile, my father's assessment of Leander's worth. They'll come around, I said finally. Some of them, anyway. And the ones who don't, well, that's their loss. You might lose your inheritance, your trust fund, your place in the family business. I might. Would that bother you? He lifted his head to look at me, his expression serious. It would bother me if you resented me for it. I could never resent you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Even if it means giving up all this. He gestured around the room, at the house beyond it, especially if it means giving up all this. I never fit here anyway. I was just trying to make myself fit, because I thought I was supposed to. He smiled and kissed me softly. Then I guess we'll figure out together. Together, I agreed and felt something settle in my chest that felt like peace. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the manicured lawns and carefully planned gardens of the Whitmore estate. But inside, in the narrow bed of my childhood, I held a man I loved and knew that whatever came next, I was exactly where I belonged.